Greetings everyone. This is part 4 of the recap for the manhwa release that which. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 are already available on my Boosty. If you wish to support the channel, the link is in the description. And enjoy the viewing experience. The very next day, the head knight's expression was absolutely priceless. When he laid his eyes upon the intricate device that Prince Roland had been diligently working on. It was indeed a magnificent steam engine, which had taken him a full 3 days to create. But he openly admitted that the credit truly belonged to Anna and her immense power. To weld so many iron plates together without a single seam. Such a feat truly required extraordinary effort. Our hero could barely contain his overwhelming delight at the sight of his brand new creation. For this was the very driving force of humanity. It was precisely what was needed for the very first industrial revolution to truly begin. He tightly embraced his truly magnificent invention, though it might sound a bit crude to some, but he firmly believed that the machine exuded an incomparable beauty, of pure skill and masterful craftsmanship. Artair genuinely could not comprehend whether this crude pile of iron plates was actually an actual instrument for conducting the grand ceremony of a wicked devil cult. Brother Roland then smiled and confidently declared that he would now demonstrate everything for them. Just 5 minutes later, the water began to boil furiously. Soon a distinct cracking sound emanated from the cylinder. Roland recognized this as the unmistakable sound of thermal expansion. The metallic piston component expanded perfectly to fit snugly against the cylinder's walls. The blonde-haired Artair then mumbled to himself, "Isn't this merely some sort of furnace?" But it did not much resemble one at all then. As the steam reached its maximum pressure limit, the piston was forcefully pushed downward, while the other swiftly moved upward. As an impressive result of this action, in a very short time the engine achieved tremendous speed. From the loud sound of its intense operation, a rather irritating buzzing sound filled their ears. A truly astonished Anna then thoughtfully pondered. So this is what His Highness Roland meant by the incredible power that lies hidden deep within nature itself. Meanwhile, the head knight's face, his face simply lit up with absolute astonishment. That colossal iron wheel, massive and imposing, a weight he could barely even budge before, was now spinning effortlessly, truly freely. Yes, with such an astonishing and profound ease. Practically twirling like a light feather. Just standing beside it, he could already feel the powerful gusts of wind. This truly showcased the raw power and incredible potential of the steam engine. Yet, a subtle unease began to slowly creep into his heart. The prince had declared quite boldly that this invention could totally replace human and animal labor. And now, it seemed like he was actually telling the absolute truth. Against such overwhelming power, even the most elite warriors would crumble. Even a squadron of 10 fully trained knights, especially since it took 15 long years just to train them. But constructing this engine only took a mere 3 days. Even if a blacksmith only worked part-time on it, he would still only need a brief amount of time. Perhaps just a single week to fully craft it. Plus, this amazing machine requires no sustenance whatsoever. It has no fear of the biting cold. Doesn't need to be fed, never. Arrows and swords would prove completely useless against it. If this machine were deployed right on the front lines, it could unleash absolute pandemonium on the battlefield. This then sparks a totally different and pressing question. Are traditional knights even truly necessary in a world where something so utterly astonishing and revolutionary exists? The young man, however, was absolutely ecstatic, thrilled by the idea that his world-changing plans were now advancing into the next grand era. Later that very same evening, as dusk settled, he flung open the door to his private chambers, only to once again find the elusive lady assassin waiting inside. This time, however, she was actually smiling, perched on his bed, a rolled parchment held firmly in her hand. The prince, utterly fuming, bellowed out loud, "Oh, for goodness sake, it's you again, seriously. Can't you possibly just give me a tiny bit of space? You just waltz in and out as you please, whenever the mood strikes you, just like that. This isn't your own house, you know, hello." But Nightingale merely chuckled, remarking with a smirk that His Royal Highness is, by all accounts and rumors, a complete dullard with an absolutely terrible temper, that he possesses no real aptitude for learning nor any truly special or remarkable skills at all. However, these intriguing plans here, these detailed blueprints for an iron furnace, they truly look quite fascinating indeed. Our young prince was feeling completely deflated and utterly dejected, watching her eagerly mess with his top-secret plans. Plans he'd kept securely locked away in his desk. How on earth did she even get her hands on them? The mysterious girl then inquired, "So tell me, you called this a steam engine, didn't you?" Roland once again credits all the work to Arnie, explaining that without her help, it would simply remain a blueprint on paper. Then, at the blonde's request, he elaborates, explaining what this incredible machine is for, like transporting or pumping out water, forging metal structures, or anything that requires brute force. Wherever raw power is needed, this incredible apparatus can help. The lady smiles brightly, hearing this, and immediately informs our guy that she will be taking them for herself, especially since the association has many witches who wield powerful fire magic. Roland exclaims, "Hey, wait a minute, I do not agree with this at all, though it's not like anyone asked him anyway." Well, of course, Nightingale wouldn't just take the blueprint without offering anything in return. However, it is not what you might be thinking of at all. She simply pulls a crumpled paper from her cleavage, a top-secret letter, brought by a pigeon and intercepted by her. Arnie eagerly snatched it and tore it open, only to discover it was addressed to his maid, Tyra. The assassin then stated, It looks like your perfect harem might not be so perfect after all." The note chillingly stated that she cannot repeat her previous failure, and that she must absolutely take care of the fourth prince during the treacherous demon months, while chaos reigns supreme. Memories then flash through the young man's head of how the previous Roland used her at every single opportunity, and he gets an unsettling feeling from it. As we might already know, the Playboy Lord loved to feast on her tofu, in a very metaphorical sense, of course, even though the letter was suspiciously unsigned. But judging by the contents, it was clear that it came from one of his relatives. The author expressed deep dissatisfaction over the failure of the first plan, then went on to give instructions, ordering a rebellion at Longsong Fortress. Only then did the engineer finally realize that they had succeeded. That was exactly why he ended up in this body. Roland had no other choice but to ask Nightingale to handle this, to find out who was behind the assassination attempt. The girl stood up, pulling back her hood. "As you command, Your Highness. I think this is a fair exchange for the steam engine blueprint." The next morning, when Roland woke up, he didn't see the maid Tyra. Instead, a completely different servant attended him. Moments later, a knight appeared, dropping to one knee. He had bad news. She's dead. Roland raised his eyebrows, putting on a surprised expression. Even though he already knew, he still felt uneasy. After all, it happened because of his order. Carter clarified. Tyra fell from her room's balcony. They found no signs of a struggle, and the guards saw no one near the scene. No one entered or left, so it appears she died by accident. The knight reported his findings, while carefully watching Prince Roland's eyes for any sign of hesitation. Of course, Roland understood. Everyone knew he had once tried to force himself on the maid. Though in this world that was considered normal. No one would be surprised. Honestly, in the end the hero simply said that it was unfortunate and ordered the head maid to take care of the funeral. As soon as the blonde knight left the office, Roland called out to Nightingale asking, "Did you manage to get anything out of her?" In that very same instant, almost out of thin air, she materialized at the table. The blonde revealed that the maid had taken her own life right after seeing her. The young man couldn't hide his deep disappointment. He had thought she was so competent in these kinds of matters. Purple Eyes quickly began to explain everything, detailing what truly happened. She had indeed restrained her, but who could have ever known that Tyra had hidden poison right inside her teeth, and that she wouldn't hesitate for even a second to make the decision to instantly take her own life. So the assassin had to cleverly arrange everything, making it look like a tragic accident. But even though she couldn't extract the poison from Tyra's mouth, that doesn't mean at all that everything was in vain. Pulling another mysterious note from her cleavage, the young woman added with a knowing smile, "Judging by the distinctive signature, this note is from the maid's older sister, and while it appears perfectly normal at first glance, it constantly mentions a beautiful seascape, one she often loves to observe. Her favorite pastime is surely lounging on the beach, watching the sunset and other similar things." The blonde then subtly hinted that his two brothers, as far as anyone knows, are not currently near the water. Could it possibly be then that the true mastermind, who arranged this entire scheme, is actually the third sister, the one who manages the Blue Water Port City? Most likely that's exactly the case. Garcia Wimbledon used Tyra as a pawn, a mere pawn in her elaborate game, under the terrifying pretext that Tyra's family would face grave danger if she disobeyed, forcing her to become the killer herself. And judging by the maid's impressive skills, she must have gone through 2 or 3 years of training in the art. The deadly art of assassins, Roland quietly sighed. As was only to be expected, the brutal struggle for the throne never goes without a gruesome trail of blood, even if he hadn't seriously participated in it himself. But his brothers and sisters held very different views. They longed to seize supreme power. Nothing could stand in the way of their ruthless ambitions. Suddenly, the girl leaned in and whispered in the hero's ear that she urgently needed to leave because someone was approaching quickly. He felt a slight blush rise to his face. Perhaps it was the lingering sensation of the graceful witch's charming touch. Just then, Bayers arrived with exciting news. The townsfolk willing to fight during the demon months were ready to swear loyalty and enlist for military service. Those who met his strict requirements had been selected and were now waiting by the wall. The news brought a broad, triumphant smile to the prince's face, and he firmly decided that he had to go see them with his own eyes. But before they set off, The bald advisor sincerely asked whether he truly intended for these ordinary people to stand against terrifying demons. As he posed this important question, his aged, worried brows furrowed deeply. Now let's turn our gaze to the wall, where the wind playfully scattered leaves everywhere. The brunette's first thoughts upon seeing the recruits were that Bayer's concerns were not unfounded. These worn-down peasants were truly a miserable sight. Unfortunately, such frail appearances would never scare off a monstrous horde. His companion then stated confidently, "Your Highness, these brave men are the ones who fully met your strict criteria." As he spoke, he began counting on his fingers. Men with no criminal record, aged 18 to 40, with no disabilities and physically sound. The engineer, who personally inspected each one, fully understood that he shouldn't expect too much from them. After all, this world's development was severely lagging behind. Common folk lacked sufficient food, or even warm clothing to protect them from the cold. So it was only natural that they didn't possess truly strong bodies. As a young prince, he had long been taught to ignore such depressing sights. Whenever he ventured beyond the castle walls, he often saw miserable beggars like these. In the great kingdom of Grey Castle, there even existed a grim profession of collecting homeless corpses. The advisor beside him suddenly whispered softly, "Your Highness, this project is doomed to fail. Just look at them and tell me, who here can even properly hold a sword, or even a light blade? I fear that when they face demonic beasts, many of them will lose their lives. As a result, this will weaken our defensive capability. I suggest hiring professional mercenaries from Willow Town or elsewhere, and have them guard the walls, while turning these people into laborers. They'll manage." Roland sharply rejected Bayer's proposal. He had neither a good impression of, nor trust in mercenaries, who fought purely for money. History had always shown that the strongest warriors were one's own troops, and if they were trained well, no knights could compare to them. He noted to himself that a powerful, energetic force was built on people, regardless of whether they were feudal armies of the distant past or modern forces. They had proven this rule countless times. The blonde knight asked, "So, Your Highness, should I start teaching them swordsmanship tomorrow? Though I'm not sure it'll help much." The prince repeated in surprise, "With swords? For now, make them run long distances." After giving the order, he realized his knight had never encountered this kind of training before. Roland also told him to find the hunter iron axe and bring him here. The two of them needed to see the new training method. By noon, training was already in full swing. The protagonist walked along with his close aides, past the peasants standing in formation. The knight was far from pleased with the new training approach. First, he thought the prince was doing this deliberately, but now it seemed like he was just toying with theories. Carter pondered deeply that there was no more professional training method than what his own family possessed, full of diverse methods for development, as a result of which warriors could prepare their bodies in just 5 years, mastering all the intricacies of weapon handling. And if they trained for more than 5 years, they would become top-tier warriors known as knights. But looking at these buffoons before him, who could only think about eggs, he absolutely fumed with rage. For them, food was clearly more important. And really, eggs are quite pricey these days. A quick explanation behind the scenes. The engineer announced that those who could hold this specific stance, as they were now until noon, would receive an extra egg at lunchtime. The hero whispered into the knight's ear, "Watch closely and remember everything you see. This is a form of training that must be performed over the next few days. Of course, some details will shift, but I'll write them down later, and do not dare object." He then began to ponder. In the era of cold weapons, 2 to 3 months was simply not enough to train truly well-qualified fighters. But he didn't need those Spartan warriors, who could tear monsters apart with their bare hands, wearing only their underwear. Every soldier didn't necessarily have to be incredibly strong. The most crucial thing was that the army remained highly disciplined and was capable of executing any command without a single question in such a way. To achieve this feat, the young man had to teach them the very same things he himself learned in military academy at the university, where in just half a month of such training, students became a cohesive unit, even though they came from various nations and locales, so the effect would soon become absolutely evident. Once this group of people learned to follow his commands and mastered discipline, Roland would move on to the next thrilling step. After a while, wagons begin to arrive, and the peasants eagerly line up to get eggs. Quickly becomes very noisy. Everyone tries to squeeze in as close as possible. Carter has to raise his voice, trying to get them to obey. "All right then, everyone form 4 lines and come forward one by one to receive your bowls and meals. Anyone who disobeys orders will be sent to the back of the line and eat last. Those who cause trouble will also be watched by the guards." Look at that. Their formation is strange. Was this drawn on purpose? Or does the artist have some issues? Blondie still looks confused. He feels the prince is going too far, trying to discipline them. Suddenly the crowd grows excited, shouting in unison, "Iron Axe!" Apparently, he enjoys quite a reputation around here. Turns out there was no one in town who didn't know this hunter's nickname. Roland announces a break after lunch. Then they will head to the camp, where the patrol soldiers are stationed. The blue-haired man is appointed as their captain, tasked with teaching them how to set up tents. As soon as our brother finishes speaking, whispers immediately spread through the crowd about him putting someone like Iron Axe in charge of their squad. Carter grows a little uneasy at the news. "Your Highness, are you truly planning to appoint someone from the desert people as captain? He doesn't serve Greycastle, and besides, he's not even from our continent. Witches don't belong to the kingdom either." The engineer replies in agreement, but all of them are residents of Border Town. Blondie tries to object again, but is immediately interrupted by the protagonist. "Don't worry. Here we don't care about a person's origin. As long as they follow the laws, they can all live freely. So there's no need for you to be concerned. You can also choose 2 more captains. After all, we'll expand the number of squads in the future, so it would be good to cultivate some promising people." By the way, at this moment, Roland unfolds an absurdly long sheet of paper and says, "I've already written out the training schedule. I think you should worry more about this than about the man from the desert. First of all, remember this: daily runs around Border Town before sunset. Everyone must complete this quota. If no one drops out, they can get an extra egg for dinner." Carter studies the parchment. He generally understands everything, but every afternoon, everyone must go to Teacher Carl's academy to learn Naera culture. Carl wants to teach them reading and writing. that feels completely useless for fighting monsters. The hero yawns. A good warrior must be well educated. That lesson should have been learned long ago from history. Next, we arrive at the city administration building and see our brother entering his office, still half asleep. One could say, without much surprise, he finds Nightingale waiting inside. "Here's your breakfast. While I was waiting for you, it was still hot, so I ate half of it," the girl says. Looking at this scene, one might think, she's the owner of this place, not the engineer. The young man isn't very happy that she ate his food and entered without permission. Wasn't she taught to be at least a little more polite? In front of a prince? She seems capable of that, at least, judging from their first meeting. Our brunette hero never would have imagined that she would be practically glued to his side. Instead of carefully escorting Anna, it was as if the blonde wasn't even on a mission at all, but rather enjoying a luxurious resort stay. Previously too, she had carefully hidden her figure, but now, with nobody else around to see, she openly flaunted all her stunning charms. She didn't even bother to pull up her hood. Meanwhile, the young woman leaned in close. "Do you perhaps want something like this, Your Highness?" And then she subtly lets slip that she knows he absolutely despises all this flowery and utterly unnecessary politeness. Her perceptive remark completely stunned our protagonist. Can absolutely nothing be hidden from her keen eyes? Is she somehow capable of reading his very thoughts? "All right then," he sighed deeply. He declared, "Once you start eating something here, you had better be sure to finish every last bite. If I ever want more, I will simply ask for another portion." "As you command, Your Highness." She offered a soft smile and then, approaching the table, picked up the empty plate. And so, Nightingale completely immersed herself in the meal. Meanwhile, at the very same time, the prince began to flip through his brand new blueprints. The girl then curiously asks a question. Why he is currently ordering so much extreme cold, since it is deep winter, and if he wishes for his precious ale to be properly chilled, he can simply leave it outside by the window overnight. Seeing his widely open and exposed order book,
Roland instant lit un instant.
That she has undoubtedly seen everything listed, that he had recently requested himself. Therefore, he goes on to explain that he is attempting to create frozen cheese, and for that, the current temperature is simply not sufficient. While the young lady praises the engineer for his clever ideas, he carefully ponders to himself. Even though Nightingale is certainly not his enemy, he still cannot tell her absolutely everything, as he used to do so freely with Sanaa. The steam engine was perhaps a bit too complex to grasp. However, concerning firearms and many other things, it would be much better to remain silent for now, because if the method for crafting cannons falls into the wrong hands, it will absolutely disrupt his grand plan. So, above all else, he thought, he needs to gather more information about her, and only then can he truly open up. The very same one the young man ordered for himself, a substance mainly known as saltpeter, that wealthy individuals in this very world used to chill their drinks during summer. And what is even more crucially important, it is a key ingredient for crafting gunpowder, which only adds another layer of secrecy to his already mysterious activities. After this, the young protagonist quickly changes the subject by immediately asking a question. If the witches train assassins alongside their quest for the Holy Mountain, the mysterious lady firmly asserts that no, they are simply a group of pathetic individuals who have merely banded together for their own personal dreams. She herself actually joined the association about 2 years ago, Upon hearing this, our young hero then wonders aloud if she had worked for anyone else before joining the organization, and also inquires further if there are any others who accept and are not afraid of witches like her. Gently placing her plate aside, the blonde woman genuinely laughs at his statement, calling his idea utterly preposterous. And then, with a hint of sadness, she admits that if her former masters had ever discovered who she truly was beneath it all, she would not have even been allowed through their front door. Furthermore, if she were not useful to them in some way, they would have simply and quietly disposed of her. The young man becomes increasingly curious and eagerly asks her to share even more about her mysterious past. However, Nightingale simply smiled and gently shook her head no. This time her captivating smile held a multitude of unfathomable and unknown emotions. As soon as the truly appropriate moment arrives, she promises she will certainly tell him everything. She completely understands his concern for her, which is why the girl asks the prince to please relax. She has been completely free for 5 long years now. She has absolutely no need to work for anyone anymore. Even though our protagonist could not learn very much, he did manage to confirm one thing for certain, that at least 5 years ago, she was actively involved in some criminal activities. Fortunately for everyone, it turned out that her employer was not gathering witches for his own nefarious needs. From the moment of this conversation, several days quickly pass by, and we see that our hero has finally completed his very first gun. It was a musket. The Lord couldn't hide the joy on his face. Even though various problems had arisen, in the end, it was still every man's dream. Now the real issue was the steam engine. The prototype machine was very impressive. However, they still couldn't stabilize the drill at all. For rough work, this didn't matter much, but drilling something like a gun barrel was impossible. In short, to mass-produce firearms, the steam engine itself had to be improved, and there simply wasn't enough time for that right now. Because of this, the barrel for the musket had to be drilled the old-fashioned way. Taking that into account, at most 4 more can be made before the months of demons. Meanwhile, the knight racks his brain, wondering how these so-called flintlock rifles will help in fighting demons. Our brother explains that he'll gather the most talented hunters from border town, form an elite squad, and let them use these weapons. The 4th prince is horrified when Carter suggests using patrol soldiers instead of hunters. Thinking back on those troops, one could say our hero's reluctance to entrust them with muskets is completely justified. We cut to night, deep inside the castle's dark sewers. Splashing through the water, 2 soldiers are running, Brian and Fierce. The latter turns out to be a traitor, hired by Duke Longsong to poison the food and assassinate the prince. Brian refuses to go along with the plan, so Fierce, with a scarred face, attacks him. He orders him to surrender, or he'll meet the same fate as Greyhound. Thinking of his fallen friend, the thin-mustached man grows even angrier and swears he'll never let those bastards enter the castle. Surging with strength, he knocks the scar-faced man back, sending his sword flying, stabbing into the ground beneath the water. "This is for Greyhound," Brian roared, striking with fury. The blade plunged deep into his shoulder, making the traitor scream out in pure agony. He simply could not believe it, that a mere patrolman dared to wound him so deeply. The mustached man, enraged by this, made his point clear, that while Scar wasted his precious time gambling and getting drunk in the bar, He and his friends were training relentlessly every single day to protect their beloved hometown with all their might. He swore that he would never let Long Song destroy their borderland. Just as Brian leaped to finish off his opponent once and for all, another frightener, a terrifying foe, joined the deadly brawl, delivering a brutal blow directly to his abdomen, the blade effortlessly piercing through his armor. The attack came with blinding speed, so by the time the mustached man even noticed it, it was already far too late for him to parry. In a truly desperate attempt to dodge the oncoming attack, he stumbled and fell, and at that very moment, a searing pain erupted in his chest. After 2 swift combat rolls, the man, Brian, sprang back up. This time he was incredibly lucky. The blade seemed to have avoided any truly fatal damage. But considering there were now 3 opponents against him, his chances of survival plummeted to absolute zero. Suddenly, an intense, searing pain ripped through Brian's body, just as he quickly moved to pull out his own knife. And with a lightning-fast, decisive movement, the man hurls it directly at the nearest flickering torch. With an absolutely perfect and precise hit, he masterfully manages to destroy the only remaining source of light in the entire sewer system, plunging the entire area into absolute oppressive darkness. Scar and Alice immediately screamed out. "Find him, do not let him escape from us," they cried. Some time later, deep within the grain storage facility, the mustached man had somehow miraculously managed to reach this place. And now he patiently awaited the arrival of the traders, because it was painfully obvious. Their main objective was to destroy all the food supplies, and without any food, the citizens of Borderland would be utterly forced to take refuge inside Lanson Fortress. The soldier, Brian, began to feel a deep wave of disappointment that he failed to protect such a vital, crucial object. Meanwhile, the prince charged onward, determined for the city's progress. Suddenly, a look of pure terror washed over his face, when the door behind him bursts open with a violent crash. By those very scoundrels, one of the attackers grabs Brian by his collar. "What's going on now? You won't be escaping anymore. Now I will tell you what fate awaits you by Duke Garion's will." Tun Kyus, despite the grave threats, he stands his ground firmly, boldly declaring aloud that Roland will handle everything. The invaders merely scoff at this. His Highness, that utterly useless prince, he won't save anyone now. Next, a soldier is brutally kicked in the head, pinned hard to the ground, before losing all consciousness. The poor fellow wonders to himself, "It seems this is truly how I meet my end." However, fate has very different plans. As a woman's voice is suddenly heard speaking, "You play so carelessly here, while on someone else's territory. Who would have ever thought it?" Of course, it is Nightingale herself. She asks them, "Killing someone in my presence, I fear. That's hardly appropriate now, is it?" The traders demand an answer. "Who do you think you are?" To which the girl explains in a clear and sweet voice, "Oh, I'm simply one of the castle's residents. But what about all of you? Are you the little mice that snuck in through the sewers?" It seems these thugs have no idea what a mess they've stumbled into, and their leader simply orders to kill her. Meanwhile, elsewhere, due to the profuse bleeding, Brian's vision blurred. All he could hear were chaotic impacts, the sounds of weapons clashing loudly against each other, as well as the distinct thuds of falling bodies. The girl, like a mere phantom, now appeared, then vanished within the crowd. All of her attacks were aimed at the weak points, Of her opponents, this could barely be called a fight. Felt as though that she was gracefully dancing. Compared to her amazing skill, everyone else was merely a whole crew of clumsy, bumbling fools. They tried with all their might to stand against her. But in the end, not a single one was left standing. With only her remaining, the whole ordeal concluded. The final sight Wuxiaka's eyes beheld, before his awareness completely slipped away, was the girl as she calmly walked away. That's it for now. Find 3 more parts on Boosty. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time.